thank you very much, everyone, and I'm really pleased to be part of the conversation around hybrid working today. I'm just going to say a few words, really, and I'm going to talk about hybrid working from the perspective of the line manager. And what I want to do is just talk you through some of the research that myself and my team have been undertaking over the last couple of years. And the research has been academic research, business research, and research about some of the great practices that already exist around the civil service. And the aim of that is so that we can provide the tools and techniques, standards, accountability, and expectations for line managers working in a hybrid setting. Right, I'm not great with the clicker, but I will move on to the slide, the important slide. I mean, what we do know is line managers have a really massive impact on people's well-being, performance, productivity. And the research has told us that having a capable line manager can increase productivity by up to 20% when you couple that with technology. Yet, across the Western Hemisphere, only 9% of people apply or actually aspire to be a line manager. I think there's a reason for that. Line management is really hard. We know that line managers have really had to weather the societal shocks that we've gone through and create a really supportive working environment for their teams. At the height of the pandemic, 49% of the working population was working from home. And this has now settled to around 40% of the workforce working from home at least part of the week. It feels kind of being in a privileged position, being able to talk about hybrid working, because that means over 60% of employees continue to work in the office or their working environment, particularly if you've got a customer-facing role. Line managers now manage with teams that are generally geographically dispersed, where you've got teams that are hybrid working. And a number of the questions that we know line managers are asking is, how do I manage in the hybrid setting? How do I ensure that all my teams have got visibility in this setting? How do I effectively manage when I've got people that may not be in the office and may be less visible? How do I deal with various personalities, introvert, extroverts, etc.? And how do I manage effectively and support the careers of people when they may be working part-time or they may have caring responsibilities? And what we did last year is we undertook some, as part of the research, we did a large survey on line managers over the civil service live events. And what we did, we asked people, what do you want from a line manager? And as you can see here on the slide, over the resounding top thing was around communication. They want line managers to be clear. They want managers to prioritise the well-being of the team. And they want line managers to be clear on objectives. And all of that is very challenging in an environment when you're working in a hybrid setting. We also asked a number of managers what they felt most challenging. And what you'll see on the right or left-hand side of the slide, whichever way you're looking, the biggest issue for line managers was having time to line manage, as well as how do they manage conflict and have those difficult conversations. If you think about it, a lot of the time the medium is the screen, and so you miss all of the non-verbal cues, and in fact you can generally only see the non-verbal cues from the waist upwards. Really challenging for line managers. What we also did is, as we went around Civil Service Live, we asked in the audiences what do you want from line managers when you're facing a challenging situation. So what are the skills and expertise that you want from line managers? An overriding thing again was communication, but that was also nuanced with things like honesty, empathy, and integrity. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I understand why only 9% of people aspire to be a line manager. It is a very rewarding job, but it's very difficult. What we have done from all of this research is identified what are the things that enable a manager to be an effective line manager. We have developed standards which hopefully take account of this complex environment. We had over 500 civil service line managers road testing the standards in November, December last year. We're just finalising them, and then we will roll these out April onwards this year. And we'll also be providing tools and techniques and development for line managers to enable them to kind of operate effectively within a hybrid environment. So thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carol. An interesting way for us to start through the lens kind of line management. So I think really important that post-COVID, we do kind of take stock and say, what has the impact been on that management level? And as you said, some of the research is showing they're the level that have borne the burden, really, the biggest burden of this change in working patterns. So as you say, some of the challenges for managers in terms of how do you manage a team now that's more geographically dispersed? How do you manage things like conflict within a team when you're not together in a room, when you can't pick up on those visible kind of cues as well? How do you make sure when not all of your staff are in the office to the same extent that you're not overlooking some, that everybody's got equal visibility and they're all getting the same kind of performance management? And then from the staff point of view, what they really want is good communication still with their line managers, clarity of what you want from a line manager, and a focus on well-being as well, making sure, because there's some research that shows actually people are working harder in a hybrid world because they're working longer hours actually when they're at home. So lots of food for thought there in our first presentation. Thank you so much, Carol. Lauren, over to you.
So just to say straight up front, this is not my file for the Government of Canada, so any rogue opinions here are me personally and should not be attributed to any of the hierarchy above me or the people who actually own this file. Hybrid's been a contentious issue in Canada. I would say that of the sort of Westminster-based systems around the world, we're probably one of the ones that has had the hardest time with this as a topic. And I think that a lot of that is mindset, and also an unfortunate way that some of the commentary and some of the rules rolled out. People near broke themselves in the pandemic to try and deliver services very quickly. And when it was time to come back to the office for hybrid, there was a lot of commentary about return to work as though people hadn't been working during the pandemic, and some very unfortunate comments about productivity, which were not substantiated by any form of study. And so people kind of got off on the wrong foot with this topic. And I think in Canada, we really need to kind of get back on the right foot with this. If you'd said to public servants 4 years ago, you know what? We are spontaneously going to let you work from home 2 to 3 days a week. And if you want to move to a remote location and apply to your deputy minister for permission to do that, people would have said, oh my gosh, sign me up. There would have been like recruitment lines up all over the place. This is a good thing for the public service. I think the way that it's been come back because we told you so has not been well received, but the base principle is so excellent. And we see this flexibility being really good for introverts. I've seen throughout the public service in Canada, people who are tired, if they're very introverted, 5 days a week in the office is exhausting for people who are neurodiverse, and that's been really great. We're seeing a lot of benefits to families. I mean, you mentioned the gender angle earlier, but I think in Canada we're seeing a lot more balance in terms of men taking on more roles with the family, particularly if you've got dual public servant households. And one of the other areas that I think has been perhaps most impactful is in the way people dress. And I got all formal for England, but normally I'm in Snoopy t-shirts and whatever the developers will let me into the pit with. But the idea that on screen, at least in Canada, people started to just come to work as they came downstairs. And it started to become very difficult in a room to see who was the deputy minister and who was the senior analyst who might actually have the answer. And people started to form relationships more on the basis of ideas than on the basis of hierarchy. And people who were not in a socioeconomic class to go down to the mall and buy a suit from Ted Baker were now suddenly able to kind of get in the room and have a reasonably much the same look as the deputy minister. And that was amazing online. And now that we're coming back to the office, the same thing is happening. That spread of come as you are. And I think regardless of where we work, home or hybrid or in the office all the time, that come as you are movement is a gift from the hybrid workforce.
Really interesting, Lauren. I mean, I think you underplayed it a little bit. I don't know, people in the room might not. This has been hugely controversial in Canada, hasn't it?
Oh,
working.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we're not done yet, which is part of the reason I'm not speaking directly to our position.
Absolutely. Very interesting points there around some assumptions maybe about productivity, maybe not having the evidence base behind some of those assumptions. Interesting as well what you said about how this might have been a positive thing for people maybe who are neurodiverse or introverted as well. So we've done webinars on hybrid working, and lots of people that had accessibility issues, maybe that had disability issues that needed adjustments in the workplace, said it was really good for them to see their colleagues who are now working at home asking for some of those adjustments at home, and then realizing how easy it would have been to have those adjustments in the workplace, and kind of that was a leveler as well. But also, I might want to come back to you in a minute. You said the leveler in terms of you don't know who's kind of in the hierarchy, but maybe there's also a negative around we're losing the distinction between home and office, and that might have some negative impacts as well in terms of, as I said, working hours, for example, not switching off as much as we would like people to. So I'll come back to you on that one. Thanks so much, Lauren. Tricia, over to you.
Wow, so much to talk about. And I need my glasses because I do have so much to talk about. I recognise everything that you've just said. I think what I'm really clear on is there are extremes. There are elements of life that, well, let's be clear, it's changed forever. This is not an optional thing that we're going to have to deal with. And I have found both in my firm of EY, my own personal situation, you will detect the accent. I don't hail from these parts. I live in Glasgow and I travel a lot. I still travel as much as I did pre-pandemic, so all the promises of not being as visible in different places for me hasn't borne true, but I enjoy that. And I feel a degree of empowered choice now that maybe I didn't before, because my colleagues, a couple of whom are in the room and around today, I have noticed a change in the people that I interact with who are at the centre of some of the universes that I operate around, whether that be globally in my firm or whether that be in London or in different locations. So on a personal level, I think there's a degree of choice that's been introduced. So definitely here to stay. I have found the conversation moving rapidly on from even using the word hybrid. We're much more looking and talking with both clients and ourselves now about workforce performance, workforce transformation, workforce of the future. I won't talk about AI or we'd never get out of the room. But a lot of what we're doing we've also have studies based on workforce reimagined, workforce transformation, workplace economics. What are we measuring? What are we not? How much do people feel safe with what we're measuring? The trust equation. I've got a few things that are really important to the people that I talk about, and one of them is it's emotional. I find this is quite a deeply emotional topic for some people. The ones that can access things that, from a talent point of view, they haven't been able to do before, it's fantastic. Others feel excluded. Disabilities can't always be seen. I have clients where the workforce that's coming back to the office isn't necessarily the workforce that they need to come back to the office. How do we tackle that? We have a workforce that's growing up. We're a massive student employer and young people employer. I think more than 50% of our workforce is under 27. That makes me feel incredibly old. But that generation is growing up and learning in a different way. That has been a challenge for not just us, but many organisations that have an apprentice model where you're used to being together and doing things together. So we're having to work differently to develop the skills of the future that we need. And that does require, as Carol said, very different tuned-in managers. I've got 6 kind of things that I like to think about. We talk about deeply as a firm placing humans at the centre of what we do, and I think hybrid is no different. I talk to leaders about how do you collaborate, how are you engaging people in the conversation, how do you display that care and empathy that you mentioned earlier, how do you inspire people that actually their role, the way they want to work is part of your future in an ever-changing world where AI has an impact. Technology in general can be an enabler and it can be a restrictor depending on how well it works. We've certainly found our office Wi-Fi is not as strong as it was before. So we're having the conversation when I'm going to stay at home for that important meeting because my Wi-Fi is better at home. It is just bizarre. That definitely wouldn't have happened before. I like to talk about how we're building capability. How are we using hybrid to really think about the different talent that we can access in different ways that we never did before? Very practical example for me would be locations we're using to access talent and really setting up hubs for ourselves and for our clients in a way that would have been much harder, to your point about if somebody had said, let's build a massive managed services place in Belfast or in Newcastle or in Glasgow, it would have been much harder to get through than it is today. But we're definitely accessing talent that we never did before. We've found through our research that the office is a magnet. So we found people's work habits, including dress and inclusion, changing. We often have days where I cannot get a seat in the office, whether it's Glasgow, London or Edinburgh, because the teams have convened to meet, and that's a hugely positive one. There are some people that don't want to. We're concerned about that. We don't believe that that's right not to come in at all, but it's how you do it that's really important from a mental health point of view. And that, when I say we, I mean me as a leader in our firm, but also the clients that we're working with. It is a challenge that a lot of organisations have. And then thinking about the disconnect I'm seeing between what our employees want and what often our leaders want, that's a really hot topic of conversation. Lots of other points, but I'll get to them possibly
Brilliant,
in questions.
thank you. There is so much to cover in this
so
topic,
much.
I can see already. But I like what you say about looking at this through workforce transformation,
Yep.
and it's here to stay. Whether people like it or not, this is the world that we are in now. But also, as this emotional topic, as you say, some people it's a very positive experience. Yep. For other people, it's been more of a negative experience. So I think there's not a one-size-fits-all, and that has to be taken into account, as you say, putting the human, the individual in the thinking of the organisation. And really interesting what you said, that for the organisation, sometimes the people who choose to come into the office are not the people who necessarily you want or need to come into the office, and how do you manage that? And then I like what you said there about the office as a magnet. So I wonder how many people in the audience, when we come to the questions, do see the office as a magnet, and even if they're given the choice to be entirely flexible, do they want to come into the office? Would that be their choice?
They need it, yeah.
Just for that social interaction. I've got lots of things I could ask, but I sense that we've probably got lots of questions, so I am going to go straight to the audience. So we've got two questions over here, which is like you've got two together, then I'm going to come to that side, and then I'm going to come to the middle. So two questions here. If we could get the microphones there. And also, I think, actually, I know you had a question. Do you want to ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Aiden. I work for the WP. With our shrinking estates and hot desking, how would the 60-40% work in practical terms? And if it fails, what next?
Great, thank you. So I thought this was a great question. If you want to get the mics there, let's just, while we're getting to the other questions. So a lot of organisations are taking this opportunity to shrink their estate. But then if you do want all of the team back in together at some point, how does that work? I think it's a really practical question.
Yeah, I mean, happy to kick off on that one first. What we found is, as a firm that's still growing at the same time as workplace behaviours are changing, we haven't changed real estate at all. In fact, if anything, we could do with more. So I think there's a real balance that if you're trying to structure and schedule when people do come together, when I say magnet, that's a big part of feedback from our team, is that they want to come to the office to collaborate. That means on some days you're going to have everyone in, and other days possibly no one in. So trying to encourage workforce patterns that work. Some of our teams are out with clients, so that's less of a concern for me. That's more about where they're going. But where you have a growing organisation, and many of you will be in that situation, then actually managing the workforce logistics. We've introduced new tech, we've introduced booking apps, we've introduced trying to make it as easy as possible. We fundamentally changed the layout on many of our floors to introduce far more collaborative spaces, because that's what people want to do, rather than strict desk ratios. And then we've had to change some of that back again. At my own office in Glasgow, we just simply didn't have enough desks for the people that wanted to come in. And we found a real difference in regions in terms of what people want. So adapting that and leaders really listening and being prepared to change at different points.
So using the space differently that you have.
So some space making it simpler so you can get more desks in if people just want to work. And another is making it broader.
I know we've got lots of questions, but Carol or Lauren, did you want to come in on that one?
Just very briefly, I think it's a challenge or an opportunity that many organisations are facing. So I think a really great question. I would always advocate that people have conversations, because now the way that we're working is with the government hubs, is many organisations, departments are actually working in the same building. So it's about, on a practical level, setting up working groups across the teams, thinking about how you can collectively use the space, because there's within government departments, we know everyone wants to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No one really wants to come in on a Monday and Friday, but it's about having the conversations and trying to make it work for all and spreading it across the team, across the week, sorry.
So there's a really loud microphone out there. I don't know if they can turn that down at some point outside. But Lauren, I'm going to go to the next two questions, because I know we've got lots of questions. So there's two questions here, I think. Did we get the microphone over?
Yeah, I think it's working. Hi, I'm Sumaya from the Charity Commission, and I just had a quick question on how we can make hybrid working work for young people. Like when the pandemic started, I was only 23, and I'm very introverted, so I found the experience of like working from home quite negative, and that being like made to go into, not made, but going to the office 5 days a week was really good in making me like get out of my shell. And then that experience of working from home kind of brought me back into my shell. And I know we always talk about the positive experience for carers, people from universities, but just for those who perhaps miss being in the office full time or are quite young in their career and have found it a bit difficult.
So really interesting. So actually, maybe the assumption that if you're introverted, you prefer to be at home. What you're saying is it's good to be forced to actually go into a more social
for me, everyone's different,
situation. And I think the generational issue I'll come back to as well. And we'll take the second question, because I know we've got so many. So,
hi, Stephen Parkinson from the Court Service. We've heard today that Sarah Mumby talked about a culture of innovation. Does the panel think there's a tension between mandating people to come into the office opposed to that culture where we're trying to empower leaders to deliver through outcomes rather than outputs?
So you're saying that the option being you should give complete freedom to people?
So you're trying to build a culture that is innovative, but we're not allowing people to make their own decisions, to make their own decisions. We're a multi, and there's lots of other problems that we can address, like diversity of thought and things like that.
Thank you. We'll get the mics over there for the next couple of questions, but Lauren, you can answer one or both of those. So the generational younger person issue, and then shouldn't for innovation reasons, shouldn't we leave it up to people?
Well, maybe come up the middle of those two. So the thing with hybrid is it's kind of like the Occam's razor. And what I mean by that is it's not a fix unto itself. Like your issue with onboarding, if our departments don't have good onboarding, if we don't have a culture of teams where people know where they belong and they feel a sense of belonging, hybrid is going to make that worse. But hybrid's not going to make that better. Like it highlights for us, but the onus is still always on good onboarding. The onus is on having a good culture and managers and senior managers who are going to create good cultures. And I think the same thing too about productivity and outputs, things we measure versus things that have real meaning. The thing with hybrid is it's so political. Very often things are not real, and people know that. So like I'm in a pitched battle right now with our facilities team because they're saying, come into our collaborative workspaces. And I was like, that is a cubicle farm, and there's like some really uncomfortable couches in the corner. And I said to them at one point, why are those couches so uncomfortable? Well, apparently we work in a flagship government building where there is literally a policy that the furniture has to be like slidey and uncomfortable, because if the couches are squishy, people will think we're not professional. I'm not actually kidding. They had a discussion about how comfortable the furniture could be, that it would be professional. When you're having that kind of dialogue, you're not trusting your people to produce outcomes. You're certainly not engaging your incoming talent to feel like this is an environment where you want to be, where you're going to flourish. So hybrid is an opportunity, but it's the gauntlet thrown down, and we collectively and at senior levels have to build the public service that we want. And hybrid is not going to be the fix for that, nor should it be the punitive way that we force people into a model that we think it should be either.
Thanks. Carol, from a line management perspective, do you think that would work to give people complete freedom?
I think that would be really difficult. And I just want to say one thing, which is probably slightly controversial, what I've said earlier. 60% of the workforce do not have the privilege of working outside of their building or whatever setting they're in. And I think as a line manager, it would be really difficult to have 60% of your workforce in the office or whatever work they're doing, and 40% having a free-for-all. I think that there is, so I realise that's probably a bit a bit controversial, but that's what I think. I think for a line manager, well, a couple of things. One is we're all social animals, and yes, we've got different personality traits, but a lot of the work that we do is collaborative. We're providing a service to society. We're not doing that individually, we're doing that as a group. So I think sometimes you do have to be working together. And just as the lady said alongside the gentleman, actually being brought into the office is good. When we've got new people in an organisation, they learn a lot from being in an environment with other people. So as a line manager, I wouldn't want, and I'm sure line managers in this room wouldn't want to be the sole person that has that interaction. You want them people to learn from each other, to collaborate. So I think there needs to be flexibility, but I think it's flexibility within a framework.
Okay, flexibility within a framework. Tricia, very quickly, because I will put the next questions to you as well.
I think the answer is it depends. And I think I've seen two incredibly complex government projects with safety, critical data, national and international, delivered 100% remote. So it's absolutely possible. And in the middle, there's a range. I think we're talking very UK here, which is understandable. But actually on a global scale, I've looked at the most amazing things that have been done. And the grad point, back to line management, care and trust.
It's really interesting, because I think we've only had a couple of questions, but already you can see how difference of opinions and how interesting this topic is, and how we haven't, not even close yet, I think, to cracking what the kind of best solution is, I think, going forward. There were questions over this side of the room. Yes, so there's a lady right at the front here. I want to make sure I go right down the back as well. So there's a lady at the front, and then, sorry, there's another woman with green sleeve there. Thank you. We'll take those two. And then I'll come. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Eleanor from Ministry of Justice.
Sorry, you might have to just tip the...
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? So, hybrid working, the people who get to experience it know how beneficial it is. However, there's still this public perception that there's a sense of laziness, a sense of service is not getting done. How do we convince the public that actually this is the way forward, and they're still going to see the level of service in the products they require is still at a good standard?
Thanks. I really like that question. How do we counter that perception that people aren't working as hard when they're working from home? And I'll take the second question as well.
I think that was me. Hello, everyone. I'm Claire Donaldson. I'm just setting up an innovation hub for the Science, Innovation and Technology Department. So Sarah Mumby this morning was talking about innovation and changes. So hopefully I'll be helping bring some of that and bringing people together. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which kind of talks about what different individuals need, and particularly people that are perhaps at the beginning of their career or the beginning of a career in that particular organisation, is it's not just all about work. So coming together, those subtle moments mean so much to me in my work life, like a smile or a quick chat or a quick coffee or a drink in the pub or run club or book club or cinema club. And I think what's happening now, because we're all in different locations, particularly in my department, which is fabulous to represent our citizens across the country, we're missing out on that social side and what we can do about that. So there's a lot, what tools can we use in a hybrid world? How can we bring people together in a life skills way, in a network, in a social way? Something for us to think about, and something that we're thinking about as a department as well. So we want to be inclusive. We're not having all staffs anymore. We're not doing those social things because we don't want to leave people out that are in different locations. So we end up doing nothing. How can we work against that?
Okay, so Tricia, I'll come to you first on it, and you can answer one or both. So the perception that you don't work as hard at home, but also this, do we miss out on the social interaction in a hybrid world?
And I think they are linked in some way, so I'll try and keep it really brief. I'll start with the first one. I personally don't feel that, and I don't hear that a lot from clients. And I think if we get the outcomes right and the quality of delivery and services there, that is one way to absolutely myth bust. Because this is not going away, people. It's not going away. I think some of it can be how you feel yourself. I think there's something about the role that you're playing being valued, understanding who it's important to, again, why you're doing it, back to outcomes and objectives and line management. There's a lot keeps coming back to leadership. I would say leadership at the highest level. I really was it Claire? Sorry, I really liked your point there about, I think the reality is, don't stop doing the social things that people want to do, but be very aware there are people that are loving JOMO. I had never heard that phrase before. I'm personally trying to practice it more. The joy of missing out. I'm actually quite enjoying not going to some things because I'm a highly engaged workaholic and I'll go to everything. So I am really sharing that with my teams and saying, don't feel that you need to turn up at something to be promoted, to be known to the boss. So that visibility of, jacket on the side of the desk, we need leaders equipped to have that conversation. I don't want to feel guilty, or have any of my teams feel guilty about getting together. But I do acknowledge that there can be an insider outsider thing, but celebrate the JOMO.
I love that JOMO. Maybe it's a stage thing, but I'm all for JOMO.
Yeah.
Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit on what the lady in green said. Again, I just mentioned hubs earlier, and I think that socialisation beyond your team and your organisation is something to consider, because I think part of your team, I actually sit close to them. I'm Cabinet Office, so it's just finding ways to maybe using the building as a focal point for all of those things. So definitely working across teams, across departments is really important. And then another practical tip, which I'm sure you'll think about and do anyway, is a little bit of, not necessarily a roadshow, but when you're having those events, have them in different locations. And I think that really helps people feel included as well. So that's all I wanted to say on that. And yeah.
Lauren, did you want to come in on the perception point as well?
Well, honestly, I thought what you said about if we deliver as a public sector, nobody's going to give a whoop where we work from. Delivery.
And it's not always visible, is it, either?
It's not.
It's not visible, and I think that's the secret. Get it right and don't make it really visible, unless it's a benefit.
What hasn't helped, maybe, certainly in the UK, and it might be the same in other countries, I'm not sure, is that sometimes ministers give the perception that people aren't working as much from home, which is very unhelpful for civil servants who are working really, really hard at home. And I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about that.
I think...
sorry, no, I was going to jump in on the second one, so you finish up on this one.
And no, I mean, all I was going to say is come back to is leaders. I think many of us in the civil service, in the public sector, we came to make a difference to society. We came to do the right thing. And from my point of view, if I'm delivering that and delivering what my leaders want, that gives me the confidence and the self-belief. I mean, I've got my own self-belief, but I think that's where it comes from more. So I think it's kind of using the internal cues, using the organisational cues, and less so the kind of what comes out of the public.
Okay. Sorry, Lauren, you wanted to come.
Oh,
Does that help?
Yeah, just... So this isn't a full solution for everybody, but so my background's in human rights, and I work with a team of developers. And that was a real shift for me. But the culture there, they're always on chat forums, they're always, they're up on Discord, they're doing this, they're doing that. And they have like the No Bosses channel, there's like a No Lawrence channel. They create all these channels for chatter. And we have Pet Fam. We're an Ottawa-based crew mostly, but our team is spread all the way across Canada. So we created an Ottawa channel so we wouldn't make other people feel left out if we were arranging a pub lunch for those who were in town. And then the other folks found out. So then they created a Not-Ottawa channel, like Not Ottawa channel, so they could have their own like, haha, to exclude us. But it's all in good fun. But the developers in our crew taught me about how you can use these technologies to form human relationships through different time zones, through different ways of working. There's some really great solutions out there. We're a bit of a weird crew, like we love Jackbox games for social and things like that. But I think that bumping into somebody in the water cooler is so valuable. Sometimes I get on the forum on the weekend and I bump into someone on Pet Fam, because their dog photo is up, and then we have a little chat on the side, and we have book fams and all this stuff. So all fams for the like book family and dev family and all this stuff. So
you've created some of those social spaces, but online?
Yeah, but not me. Like my team created it because the developers in our environment were already used to this idea that they could build networks around the world using the technologies. And then when the pandemic hit, we'd already had some of that on our team, and it just we really doubled down on it. And now that we've gone back to the office, it's still thriving. And we're going to keep both. Just because you're not all in the physical space doesn't mean that you need to miss out on that. But it does mean there's a learning curve, and it's not just a learning curve on the technology. I feel like for me, I almost needed to pull in the energy reserves, if that makes sense. It took a bit of effort for me to wrap my head around this idea that you could engage socially online. It felt a bit tiring, especially after the pandemic. But now it really works for us. I don't know if that's useful for anybody else.
No, thanks. I want to make sure we get in at least two more questions. So gentleman down here had his hand up, and then gentleman behind. So we'll take these two together, and then we'll see if we have time for any more, but these might be the final two. So if you keep your hand up for me, thanks. And then it was the gentleman 2 rows behind. If you could just keep your hand up, that would be great. Thanks. Can we get have we got a second mic? Yeah, to the gentleman here. No, it was just here, sorry. If I can, I will come to you, sorry, I'm really sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Me? Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, DWP. Last year, civil servants were asked to do one big thing, which was data. So my question around hybrid is, what data are we gathering and sharing around hybrid working? So when we have arguments or discussions around 60-40% in the office or not, there's actual data, information behind that, scientific or otherwise, how we feel, etc.
Brilliant.
That supports one or the other, and particularly not just overall, but within different areas of business. So your point about we don't all work in that same, some of us are privileged to do 40%, others not at all. But where's the data that shows that that's the correct thing for a work coach in a job centre as opposed to somebody in a service centre as opposed to somebody in a hub?
Yeah. Really good question. What data we collect, not just the impact on the organisation, but also I'd be interested in data on the people themselves. Actually, we'll take, so can we get this mic to the gentleman at the back? And then, yes, we'll take your question, and then I will go to the gentleman at the back.
Hello, Mark Holmes from the Department for Business and Trade. I lead a policy team. I would say the policy profession has always been less of a structured development pathway than our analytical colleagues or finance colleagues or most other professions, because it's so heterogeneous and everybody does different things, and one team does different work from another, and the same team does different work the following year. And I think over the last 5 years, we've started to notice how much we've always relied on teaching people what they're supposed to do in what circumstances by watching and overhearing other people, and now they're not, because they're working at home or they're working at another site. And I'm not sure we've quite figured out how to replace that yet. Have you seen it done well in other places?
Brilliant, thank you. And we'll take the third. I'm going to challenge you all. You can answer one of these 3 questions, okay? So, especially in the policy profession, how are we kind of making up for the fact that people aren't learning from watching other people? And then the question at the back.
I lead the QA outfit, or the community of practice within apprenticeships in the Department for Education. We actually had a discussion about the hybrid working within the team, and within the development team there was a general question that in the discussions for hybrid working, was there a consideration for people who work in sites where they're the only person within the whole team that are on that site, because they feel more secluded working in the office than when they work at home?
Yeah, thank you. So a kind of different type of exclusion. They're the ones in the office, but they're excluded because everybody else is at home. So we've only got 3 minutes left. Carol, I'm going to come to you. Could you choose one of those?
Yes. The gentleman talked about policy profession. Now, I don't know where it works everywhere, but I think one of the things to come back to is around buildings again. So I am aware that in some of the hubs across the UK, there is a real presence of teams from various organisations working together and also learning from each other. So I think some of it is, I've seen where line managers will say to someone in the building, I've got a new member of staff, can they join some of your meetings, etc. So I think it just comes back to that conversations. It is something that we are developing. I think as hybrid working develops, this will develop more, but I've just seen it work very well in some locations. And then there are also, across the UK, are senior leaders that have actually got responsibility for place, that actually bring together both people in the civil service, private sector as well, again, just to find that, making sure that people collaborate.
So you can be shadowing someone who's in the same profession, but not necessarily the immediate team, which might actually have positive impact as well. Thank you, Lauren.
I'll do the QA question at the back about the developers. I mean, we have some things that we're looking at in Canada around flexibilities specific for certain types of IT work. But I think really what it comes down to is that there's an expectation now in the workplace that you'll belong to some degree. It's not, we don't just show up for a paycheck and it's hours of our life that we've signed away in exchange for money. We show up to grow, and we show up to connect, and even when we're tired, even when I show up with my pajamas on the bottom half and my blouse on the top, like we bring ourselves. And I think that this notion that you can be alone in a crowd of people is so important, and it's been the experience of many people a long time before the hybrid discussion, but now there's space for that discussion. So I would encourage all of you to think best about how you connect, to learn one new way to build community this year. I challenge all of you to build yourself into one new network or one new community or one new way of working over the course of the next year, and also to look out for those people who are struggling to do that in whatever way, shape, or form it is.
So that's interesting, because you kind of flipped it on its head and said, actually, you can be alone in a crowd, whereas your question was, how can we help connect people who are physically alone? So they're actually, we've had these issues before, just the other way around. So it's the same thing as how can we make people feel connected regardless of the situation? Thank you. And then finally, Trish, because I think we're nearly out of time.
Yeah, I get the easy question. The data question, yeah? So was it about what data we're gathering.
Are we gathering data to counter this kind of narrative that, productivity is going to go down, we're all being lazy at home? Do you know of anywhere where we're gathering data?
I think there's data in general, there's productivity data in terms of performance and outcomes, definitely. And we know that we certainly monitored, I know we're not government sector, but as a firm, we definitely monitored that people were working harder at home, and we had to temper that. Because you're looking at burnout, and we were learning, so this is like 3 years ago, really, really learning how 18,000 people overnight start to feel they have to do more, be more visible and more present. That has really tempered. I have seen clients that I've worked with, and lots of public sector clients, where that it is harder depending on what existing measurements you have in place. You're going to have to build new data. And it really forces leadership to think about what you're actually measuring. I think I love my data, but what is it any good? We can't have data for data's sake. I see you nodding, but I think there's something about the quality of what you're actually measuring. What is the outcome and who is it valuable to? And is it important? And then there's the human side of the data and trust. There's an element of, I would say from a leadership point of view, the connection between the what and where we work and the why we do it. We've got to get the data that underpins that, and I think that starts the employee discussion. So I didn't have much time to go into much more detail.
Yeah, it's a big question, I think.
It's a big question.
But definitely look on the Global Government Forum website, because I know there is research, I think, that companies have done on their productivity, but also on the impact of staff and different people within organisations, so definitely. I knew there was going to be lots of questions. I'm sorry we probably couldn't get through all of them, but please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our fantastic speakers. Thank you so much.